to get through in an hour. Welcome everybody. My name is Erin Tynan and I'll be one of the presenters for this session. I am the Pottawatomie County Family and Consumer Science Agent. And I'll let Rebecca introduce herself as well. Today.
Hi, I'm Rebecca McFarland, and I'm the Family and Child Development Agent for the Frontier Extension District, which is Anderson, Franklin, and Osage counties.
Okay, so just a few little tips or reminders. Looks like everybody's on mute, but we do want everyone to remain on mute unless you need to speak. If you need to speak, you can unmute yourself. You click on your little box, there's a mute.
Erin, we just lost you.
Sorry about that. Just a few little housekeeping things. Please remain on mute unless you need to speak, and then you can unmute yourself if you click on the right hand or on your box in the an unmute button. And you guys are probably all very familiar with Zoom. You probably know more about it than we do because you've all been doing distance learning. But we're going to utilize the raise hand, which is if you go down and you right click on the participants, it'll show up on the right hand side of your screen, and there's a raise hand button in the bottom. So if you want to speak, raise your hand and I or Rebecca will call on you. This is a very interactive class. We want you guys to talk and speak up. It's what makes the class work well. So please, we want you guys to talk. So be communicative with us when we ask questions, but there is a lot of kids on this session, and so we can't all talk at once. And so we definitely want you guys to utilize the raise hand in the right hand box there. Okay, so just a little bit about this class. We're going to talk about relationships and communication in relationships. We believe that all people will be able to utilize these skills that we teach. Whether you've dated a lot or you haven't dated at all, this class is good because we're not relying upon your dating experience. We're merely talking about some of the skills that you need in relationships. And those can be all types of relationships. We believe all relationships value or need these skills, whether it's LGBTQ relationships, friends relationships, same-sex or opposite-sex relationships, they all will utilize these skills. So the first thing we're going to do is have you guys, Rebecca's going to lead you in a little activity, so I hope you all have a pen and a paper in front of you. So Rebecca, I'll let you talk about what we're going to do next.
So what we want you to do is just take a few minutes and think about what relationships are like. And so if you're an artist, certainly you can draw using a pen or pencil if you have color pencils, whatever you have available and want to use. But just take a few minutes and think about relationships are like, and basically answer that question. But use your drawing. Of course, you can use some words if you'd like, but we really like you to use your drawing to answer that question.
There's no right or wrong answers here. It's just what you perceive a relationship to be like. So you can draw it, you can write it, just be creative. There's no right or wrong answers.
think we'll just give you a few more seconds because we need to move on to our next activity. Would anyone like to share? Relationships are like. Of course, hold your picture up so we can see it, and then share with us why you drew or wrote down the words you wrote. I'm quickly scanning through our list of participants to see if anyone's raising their hand. If we were on campus in Manhattan today, we'd actually start calling on some of you. So we'd love for you to.
Looks like John W. is sharing. Can you see that, Rebecca?
I'm getting ready to see if I can. Wow. Here, let me do the gallery view. I see Callista. Callista, you want to share with us what you have there? I'm gonna try to. You're muted. Okay.
Just that there's a lot of give and take in relationships.
Good. Thank you. There certainly is. Okay. I see Liv. Want to talk about yours?
I guess it's like you have to trust them, and it has to be a positive and loving relationship. That's what I get out of it, I guess.
Okay. And do you have positivity? Good. I see that at the bottom. Okay, thanks for sharing. Who else? I think Erin, you mentioned John, and I don't see it yet, but we have 64 participants on. That's great. So John, I think you shared yours earlier. If you want to talk about it, show it again, that'd be great. I don't see anyone else. Okay. So would anyone like to share just verbally your ideas? Relationships are like, you don't have to show us your picture, but again, as Erin said, this is very interactive. Make sure you unmute yourself so we can hear you.
So I guess I will share. Relationships should be fun, exciting, adventurous, and have a lot of communication in them, I think, because I think communication is key to a successful relationship.
That's excellent, Charisse, because yes, communication is very important, and we will talk about that more during some of our activities. But yeah, thanks for sharing.
Some of you, it looks like all, the ones that spoke up, they had, positive things, but some of us may not have put positive things on our sheets. Some of us may have in our lives, and we've probably all seen negative and positive relationships, but some of us may have very negative experiences with relationships, whether it's our own or whether it's maybe relationships that we saw growing up. And relationships are really challenging. You're probably going to go through various relationships in your life, and more than likely those relationships will end, and sometimes it's not always pretty. And so what we're going to talk about today is really what we know through research that makes positive relationships. And some of us haven't seen a lot of that maybe growing up. We may have seen a lot of negativity in relationships, and we don't want that. We have seen maybe how those relationships have weighed people down, and how much they can affect not only our mental health, but our physical health too. And we're all going to make mistakes in relationships. Everybody on here is probably, if they haven't, they eventually will. Rebecca and I have made mistakes in relationships, and that's life. And what we're wanting to teach you today is what we know through research helps relationships progress, and also thinking about what you need out of a relationship. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go into a breakout session. Rebecca's going to lead one and I'm going to lead one. And we're going to talk about the stages of a relationship. So this is going to be a very interactive part. So we definitely need you guys to utilize the raise hand on the side here in these breakout sessions and speak up, because if you don't speak up, this will have no meaning. You guys have to talk about this and be very communicative when we go into these breakout session rooms, because this is all about your guys' perception of relationships. So Rebecca and I have a screen that we're gonna share, and there's gonna be 5 stages of a relationship that were shared on there. And you guys are going to have to put those in order as a group. You're gonna discuss how you think that those stages of a relationship progress. So there's going to be dating, relationship, commitment, and hanging out. And we'll have these on the screen so you guys can discuss them. There's also intimacy. And you guys have to discuss what you think comes first, second, third, fourth, fifth in the series of a relationship. And just, there's no like hardcore right or wrong answers. It's all about your perception. How do you think that relationships should progress in a healthy way? And so there's going to be hopefully lots of conversation going on as to why you think that one stage should come before the other. And again, just be communicative, talk about how you view things, and then we're going to come back together and discuss the stages and as well as different actions in the stages. So Donna's going to put us into breakout rooms.
Okay, can you see them all? Yep, they're heading out.
Order, you guys are going to discuss how you would put them in order. If you were to design the ideal relationship, how would you think that would look? Trying to figure out how to get to the participants so you can see. I can see who's raising their hand to discuss. What is the deal here? All right, I can't get back there. However, okay, so we probably have a little amount enough people. If you guys just want to, whoever wants to speak up can. So if someone wants to take themselves off mute and discuss how they would put them in order, that would be great. There I am.
I think your first step has to be hanging out, because you have to get to know the person and build a relationship with the person before any of the 5 stages can really do the stages. So
you think hanging out should be number 1. Does anybody disagree with him? Everybody kind of think that that's probably the first stage?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. What do you guys think should go second?
I think commitment.
Okay.
So you stay committed to whether it's a friend, partner, whatever.
Okay.
How about a relationship? Because I feel like you have to build a relationship with that person before to figure out if you're committed to them or not.
All right, what do other people think? We got either commitment or relationship as I think should go second.
I think relationship should go second. It sounds accurate.
I think that commitment should go second. You should be committed to that person before you have a relationship, whether it's a friend or your partner.
Okay. We got a couple thinking commitment, a couple thinking relationship. Anybody else? All right, what do you guys think about number 3? What do you think should go there?
Well, either commitment, relationship, or dating, depending on which one we choose. But I'd
Okay.
say whichever. I'd say it's either commitment or relationship, depending on which one we don't use or used.
Anybody else? Maybe it might be helpful to think about like what are some other names that you guys use for some of these stages. I feel like every generation has different names that they use for some of these stages. And so you guys might have, when you think about like talking with your friends, like, and people are starting to, talk and you think there might be something there. How would you coin that? How would you discuss that with a friend? Oh, so-and-so are, what would you say?
Hanging out or dating.
Hanging out?
Yeah.
So I think that a relationship is kind of like talking, whereas you can talk to a lot of people but not be committed to them, and you can still build that relationship and not be committed to them. So you're kind of like acquaintances, but not really into that stage where you're committed to them and going to start dating and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so you would think that like a relationship would come before commitment then, because you're not quite like committed to that person quite yet, but you're just in a relationship with them.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that whether it's a friend or someone you're dating, commitment is something good to have both, because it's your friend. You want them to know that you're there for them, that you're gonna be there for them, or whether you're dating them, then yeah, the same thing.
Okay. Sorry, you're kind of hard to hear. I don't know if you're kind of cutting in and out.
Hey, Aaron, I have a question.
Yeah.
I said it's possible to if I show you, like write on the screen for me like that. Is it okay if I like write numbers next to
Sure.
what we have?
Yeah. Sure.
And we have this as 2, or are we agreed?
Oh, yeah. So we have number 1 for hanging out. Number 2 is kind of between commitment and relationship.
Okay.
And number 3 was dating.
All right.
And then maybe we probably need to decide if we're going to do commitment or relationship first. I'm probably hearing more people talk about relationship over commitment first. Is that probably do number 2 for relationship and then commitment number 3?
Okay.
Does that sound accurate? Okay, I'm getting some
Yeah.
thumbs ups. Okay. And then where do we think, so then dating would come after that. So dating would be 4, and then intimacy would be number 5.
Yeah.
You guys all kind of agree that would be how you how you would do it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is kind of challenging because, you know, in person, we always have a lot of different conversations around this, and this is so much easier to do in person. So it's kind of hard to do this over Zoom, because we usually have you guys line up in a line, and you guys get a card and you go to where you think you are in the timeline or in the stages. And there's always lots of conversation around like, well, I think dating's this, but, and some people will say, well, that's not what I view dating as. When I'm dating somebody, it doesn't mean that I'm exclusively with them. It just means that I'm dating that person, but I could also be dating someone else. And some people think there's a difference between intimacy and commitment. And there's lots of different terminology around intimacy. Are we talking about physical intimacy? Are we talking about emotional intimacy? And so there's a lot of conversation that usually arises from the differences in all of these stages. The important thing to remember about all this is each one of us come to relationships with different interpretations of how we think all of this falls and works. And the only way that we're able to move through a relationship in a positive way with someone that may have a total different perception of relationships is that we have to communicate. What does this mean to you? What, you know, you may ask somebody out and they may think that that's total commitment, but to you, it's just a very casual dating relationship. So you definitely have to have that conversation about what each one of these things mean to you, because we are across the board about how to interpret some of these things. Okay, so we're going to get back into the main session and with our stages. So we have one's hanging out, 2 is relationship, 3 is dating, or no, 3 is commitment. Gotta write these down. 4 is dating, and 5 is intimacy. Okay, we're gonna see what the other group came up with. Donna, you wanna put us back in the main session? What our group decided as far as the stages. So we had number 1 is hanging out, number 2 is relationship, number 3 is commitment, number 4 is dating, number 5 is intimacy. What do you guys have?
And I asked someone to take notes, and so I think Kaylee was the recorder, and she's going to report. Kaylee?
Yep. So our group had hanging out first, basically getting to know each other within that, then relationship, then dating, where you actually go on dates, followed by our closer pair, which we had some discussion on which one we wanted first, intimacy or commitment, and we ended up going in that order with intimacy before commitment.
Okay. So just differences in our 2 groups there. So the correct way, let's see. So this is what, according to research, the way that relationship stages should progress. We have hanging out first, dating second, relationship third, intimacy fourth, and commitment as 5. So a little different than what we may have come up with. But that just shows, as I was talking kind of with my group, the differences in the way people interpret things. And that's really important in relationships. And yes, that may be the way that the book shows, how they should progress. And it doesn't necessarily mean that all relationships should fall into this to be positive or healthy. The important thing that throughout relationships as they progress is that they progress in a way that both individuals in them are on the same level. And the only way you can do that is through communication, because like we were discussing in ours, someone's interpretation of what dating means and the other person's in a relationship interpretation what dating means could be polar opposite. I always interpreted dating to be that someone was exclusively dating me, but what if the other person interpreted that as they're going to date all around, and how hurtful that could be to the person who didn't think that that's what that meant. And so everybody brings different perceptions into relationships. It's a lot based on how you were raised, the relationships that you saw around you, and those are going to be integral to how you process things in relationships, and important in the way that you communicate about those as well. So based on those stages, let me pull those up again. I've got a couple different, so again, based on those stages, I have some cards here. And you got to tell me where you think some of these things would go in those relationship stages. So for instance, this one is going to parties together. Where would you think that would fall in the relationship stages?
Hanging out.
Hanging out, yeah. Yeah, that one's kind of pretty straightforward. How about, about texting?
Hanging out,
Where do you
I suppose.
hanging out still?
Yeah.
How about this one?
Definitely commitment.
We got some commitment.
Commitment, dating maybe.
I think relationship.
Relationship, okay. Do you think that that love is something that could, sometimes people say this and they might not necessarily mean the kind of love that you might interpret? Some of you are saying like this comes way like late in a relationship. Have you ever known people to just, start dating and then one of them randomly says, I love you? Have you ever seen that? Do you think that's the same, again, the same kind of love that maybe you're interpreting or the love that you think it is?
I think it kind of depends on the person. I think some will say it really early in a relationship, and
Mm-hmm.
some will wait until like they truly feel like they trust that person.
Yeah, very different perceptions about that love word, when it needs to happen, how it happens. And again, those are all things that you talk about your interpretation of what love is with your partner. How about this one? Having conflict. Where do you think that falls?
Relationship.
Okay. Anybody else? Hanging out? Anybody else?
Anywhere.
Anywhere?
Relationship.
Yeah. So this is a tricky one because sometimes people will say, "Oh, I've never fought with my partner," and I will want to say to that person, you probably haven't known them well enough, long enough, or you're maybe in the beginning stages of a relationship. So when you guys are in relationships, they should be fun, especially at your age. They shouldn't have a ton of conflict. And if it's conflict all the time, it's probably not a good situation to be in. But conflict also helps us grow. And just amongst us right here, we've had conflict about where we think things should fall. And that is important in relationships. How you work through that conflict is where you really, a relationship really elevates itself. Having good communication, talking about your feelings, letting that person that you're with talk about their feelings, being a good listener. those kinds of things are really important when you have conflict. It doesn't mean that you should never have conflict. All relationships have conflict. We fight with our spouses all the time. But if you want to be in a healthy relationship, you have to find a healthy way to adjust to that conflict and talk about some of those things. How about this one? Regular phone calls.
Commitment.
Commitment.
Relationship.
Okay. Anybody else?
Commitment.
So kind of later on, you think maybe?
I think it could be in hanging out. I just genuinely like to talk to people on the phone. I find it better than text.
Mm-hmm. And you're going to probably have a lot of varying answers here. Some people, I know people like some teenagers that have relationships over like Snapchat and Instagram, which is baffling to me. And maybe you're one of those that like have most of your communication with a partner over Snapchat or Instagram. I don't know how many of you have had regular phone calls, or you probably have a lot less interaction with that person in person or maybe via phone than what maybe my generation did, because we didn't have things like Snapchat when I was growing up, so we had to talk to people. And so some people will, you know, again, that is a good communication piece. Where do you, if someone's calling you all the time and you're like, I'm not about that, you need to have that conversation with them. But if you feel like someone's never calling you and you're not communicating with them, then that's an important conversation to have too. How about this one? Having them over to your house.
Relationship.
Hanging out.
Hanging out?
Pretty early on, yeah, so probably hanging out.
Okay. Hanging out sounds like a lot. The beginning of a relationship. What if, this also kind of depends on your age too. I don't think it's uncommon for someone that's a little bit older, maybe in college, for them not to meet their parents for a while. Or you may be dating someone who it's not important to their parents that they meet that person that your kid's dating. And what if you find that really odd because your parents have to meet that person before you start dating them? Would that put you in kind of a predicament? That's one of those that, again, it's based on your family dynamic. And some parents wouldn't even let you allow to talk to somebody until they met them. And other parents are totally fine with, you know, until you guys start, you know, dating in a relationship, I don't need to meet them. And it doesn't, you have to learn, you know, if you're one of those people that are very different than that, again, that's a communication piece that you have to talk about with them. How about this one? Alone in the bedroom.
Definitely intimacy.
Intimacy.
At least.
Okay. Anybody else?
It could honestly just be hanging out. If you are just talking, I don't tell my parents literally everything that I tell my friends, so sometimes you just...
Would some people's parents be okay? Like, and it's not a right or wrong answer. Or would your parents be okay if you had someone alone in your bedroom?
No.
No.
No, definitely not.
No.
Unless the door was open or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody, okay, if the door's
Unless they're
open.
a close friend.
Okay, if it's a close friend.
Unless they know them. Same.
Yeah, unless like my parents know them and like their family and everything, they'd be okay with it.
Okay.
You'd have to trust them.
Okay.
My room's in the basement, so even if we go hang out in my space, you have to consciously make an effort to come down and...
Okay. So it sounds like most of you, for the most part, your parents probably wouldn't be okay with that. And again, there's no right or wrong answers. Some households, this is fine, and some households, oh, heck no. And again, that is a conversation that you have to have with that person. Especially if you're dating with somebody, if your parents are okay with you being alone with someone in your bedroom and you're dating someone that says, oh no, my parents are not okay with that at all. In order to avoid hurt feelings, you really have to have communication about why you operate the way that you do. And that is, you know, one of those things. So we're going to have to move on. I have some other ones there, but we'll have to move on because we don't quite have enough time. So Rebecca's going to kind of get into some consent in relationships, and she's going to talk about that for a little bit.
Okay. Can you see my PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I still was on mute. So we're gonna kind of switch gears and talk about consent because both Erin and I feel like this is a really important topic for us to talk about. But before we actually talk about it and do an activity, I want to show you this video. And hopefully, yeah, it's gonna work.
Only 1 in 3 Canadians fully understand what consent is. So Western, let's talk about it. Let's think about consent like a bike ride. If you wanted to go on a bike ride with someone, you'd say, hey, I'd like to go on a bike ride with you. And they'd be like, hey, I'd like to go on a bike ride with you. Boom. Put on your helmet, kid. You're going on a bike ride. You might hear things like, this feels great, or keep going. These are ways you know they're enjoying the bike ride. Maybe not those ones. If they said no, then that.
Sorry.
Only 1 in 3 Canadians fully understand what consent is. So Western, let's talk about it. Let's think about consent like a bike ride. If you wanted to go on a bike ride with someone, you'd say, hey, I'd like to go on a bike ride with you. And they'd be like, hey, I'd like to go on a bike ride with you. Boom. Put on your helmet, kid. You're going on a bike ride. You might hear things like, this feels great, or keep going. These are ways you know they're enjoying the bike ride. Maybe not those ones. If they said no, then that's that. They do not want to go on a bike ride with you. You don't toss them up on a bike and say, oh, come on, it'll be fun. No is no. And if they don't say anything at all, it's still a no. The absence of a yes is a no. They could say, heck yeah, or, I might want to. And you put on your biker shorts, get the bike, grab the helmets, and in that time, they decided that they don't want to and start to backpedal. And that's okay. They aren't obligated to go on that bike ride. You'll just have to bike on your own. Oh, and being dressed in bike shorts and a helmet doesn't automatically mean someone wants to ride a bike. It's quite presumptuous to think they do. Even if you happen to be in a relationship with your bike partner, you have to ask each and every time. Say your bike partner has had a couple of drinks, and we're not talking about water. They're not ready to go for a bike ride, even if they've told you they are. A drunk yes is not a sober yes, and by law, you need a sober yes. Oh, and just because you bought them drinks all night, it does not entitle you to a bike ride with them. Same rules apply if they're unconscious. The conscious people can't ride bikes, and they definitely can't say yes to doing so. The number one priority is to make sure they're safe. Even if they're just sleeping, they can't say yes to a bike ride. And it can be a scary thing to wake up and find yourself on a bike. Imagine your boss telling someone, you can only work here if you bike with me to work. That's crossing the line. It would be an abuse of power for a boss or a person of influence to suggest such a thing. And just because someone wanted to go for a bike ride once, doesn't mean they'll want to every time. Maybe it was just a one-bike stand. You can't say, what are you talking about? We biked last night. You're simply not entitled to another bike ride if they don't want to. Maybe your fellow cyclist is totally cool with biking on paved roads. That does not mean that they are up for extreme mountain biking. You're not going to insist that they go speeding down a mountain with you if they are only interested in paved roads. That's uncomfortable territory, and you don't want to pressure your bike partner, do you? What if Alex here told you that Taylor really wants to ride bikes with you? Does that mean you throw Taylor up on a bike and say, all right, let's start pedaling? No. The only person that could say Taylor wants to go for a bike ride is Taylor. When all is said and done, riding a bike with someone should be fun, memorable, and hey, maybe a bit sweaty. But it can only be that way when everyone involved has willingly agreed to participate. So whether it's having sex or bike riding, consent is key.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about consent. But before we do that, anyone have any comments, questions about that little video we showed? We will break into groups here in a little bit again and have some discussion about some scenarios about consent. But I wanted to share a few slides first, because again, I think it's important to know what consent is. And I think that little video showed some really important things about consent. And of course, one of them is it has to be a mutual agreement, okay? And that needs to happen every time. And you saw in the video, it talked about that. So it has to be an ongoing conversation that occurs, okay? Also, that relationship status does not make consent automatic. So because you, again, may be in a relationship with that person, it doesn't mean that consent is automatic. Again, it needs to be talked about, discussed every time. And again, saying yes to one act doesn't mean that you're obligated to consent to other acts as well. And absence of no is not consent. So there's no such thing as an implied consent, okay? And then it's not consent if you are manipulated, you're pressured or threatened, or you are unable to legitimately give consent. And so we saw in that video, if someone's asleep, if they're unconscious or they're under the influence of conscience altering substances, okay? They're intoxicated or they're impaired, they cannot give consent. So what we're gonna do now is to, again, put you in breakout rooms. And Erin, I think if you wanna take group 1 and discuss those 2 scenarios, and then I will take group 2. And it looks like we have about, 5 or 10 minutes. Let me see. Yeah, actually, let's do about 8 minutes. Donna, if you would, put us in breakout rooms. And that may be more time than what we need, but we can just join back in when we're finished. Okay, so I think you just want to read that first scenario on your own, and then let's just talk about that. And this scenario may be different than some that you may think, because it asks, can Ken give free and informed consent? So what do you think?
I'd say yes, because they've taken all the precautionary steps, and as long as they're both okay at that time, it's fine.
Okay. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else? I agree. Okay. How real do you think this situation is? These are scenarios from a curriculum that I use, but how real do you think the situation is? Or and maybe your friends groups or experiences that maybe you've been a part of. How real is this?
Like 1 in 1,000, maybe. Never heard of that before. It's very rare that it happens like that, at least in my area.
Okay. Why do you think that?
I would say it's very real. I think it probably happens more than we all realize.
Okay. So we're kind of hearing both sides of the pendulum there. So whose responsibility is to make sure that that conversation happens, that communication happens?
Just
The
the
two
individual
partners.
people.
Yeah, the partners, the two involved in that relationship, or whoever's involved in that relationship. So I know, for me growing up, that is not something that I learned about, at home or in school. And so it was very difficult at that time, when I was dating and adolescent and into college too, that we talked about these things. And this is a lot of the reason why Aaron and I both feel like it's important to provide these classes. I mean, some of you may have this, in your high schools and health classes or whatever classes, but we know that it's important to share this information. And so again, that's why we provide this class at Discovery Days, and we have for the last, I don't know, probably almost 7 or 8 years now. Okay, so let's talk about the next one. What do you think? Can Jenna give free and informed consent?
I think it's definitely no, because she's under the influence.
Okay.
And even though she's done it before, it's not right. We're under the influence.
Yeah. Anyone else want to share?
I agree.
You agree? Okay. Anyone else? So again, I think the important thing is to remember it needs to occur every time. Okay, that consent needs to be done every time. It needs to be communicated every time. And like I said, her partner with whom she has had sex before pulls her into a room. But again, she is unconscious. She is not able to consent to say yes. And so should not assume that it's a yes. Okay. Didn't think it probably would take quite as much time as we might think to discuss these. Let's go ahead and talk about the two in group one though. So read the first scenario and then let's discuss that. So what do you think about that scenario one in group one?
I think that she can't really give consent.
So she cannot give free consent.
I agree, because in that video, you have to ask every single time, even if it's the millionth time or 100th time or whatever.
Right. So she's really feeling pressured here. And so that slide that I also shared would talk about being, manipulated, pressured. Sometimes people use power, which is not necessarily in this situation, but people will use power. And so that is not, she does not have the ability to give free consent. Okay. And then let's read the last one about Haley. So how do you feel about this situation? Is Haley able to give free and informed consent?
I kind of believe it's kind of, what is it? Sexist in that, because the woman does not have to obey the husband all the time. And once again, it's between the two partners. The mom has no right, technically, to like interfere in whatever they do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in some areas maybe, but like with intercourse, that's not right. I don't believe.
Okay. Anyone else want to share?
I think they really just need to talk to each other. And even though her mother might have told her that, I think it just depends on what she personally thinks. And like, they just really need to sit down and talk about it before they do anything.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to share before I have a few things to share? So I put this scenario in it because I think it shows how our values, maybe our family's values, the values that we grew up in, may be different than ours. And again, it's one of the things that, we have to decide for ourselves then, what are our values? And then make those decisions based on that. so she's she's feeling a little bit of the pressure of the values of her family, but at the same time she's kind of questioning her own as well. And so again, it shows about the importance of talking about it and getting that consent every time. And then she also does not, maybe she hasn't made the decision herself whether or not it is right to have sex before marriage. So that's another thing that is really important. You have to know for yourself what you want in relationships, what your values are as well. And we didn't have time today to talk about that, but we do have some activities that I do with other groups. We talk about what are your values and how do they fit with the relationships that you're in. So really getting to know know things about yourself before you get into relationships. Okay, so hopefully Donna will be bringing us back together so we can discuss. We have about 8 or 9 minutes before this class is over, and there we are. So we'll see you in the large group.
Okay.
Okay, so let me share that real quick. And we didn't necessarily, I guess, ask for somebody or one person to kind of share, but so Aaron, just talk about your the scenarios in group 1, please.
Yeah, actually Corbin volunteered to share ours, so he's going to talk about them.
Okay.
Yeah. So our group decided that Anna cannot freely give consent because she is being manipulated by Andy.
Okay.
And signs of that manipulation are like what Andy says, like, if you really loved me, you'd want it.
Yes.
And then Haley cannot give free and informed consent because of her mother's influence.
Okay.
And like, I believe that like relationships where like one partner is dominant over the other is unhealthy.
Okay.
And that's an example of Haley and Tom's relationship. Tom seems to be somewhat dominant over Haley.
Okay. And I put this scenario in here because I think it shows that our families' values, the families that we grew up in, certainly influences, our decisions, but then we also develop some of our own values as well. And so, for Haley, I think it's, she's not quite sure what her value is. She knows what she was taught or what her mother believes, but it seems like she still is not quite sure what she believes. And so again, the importance of knowing yourself and what you want out of relationships too, and what your values is very important. So does anyone in group 2 want to volunteer? Because we didn't ask them 1, 2, but I'm asking now, does anybody want to talk about?
I can.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So in the first situation, we believe that some of us believe that it's not common, but the majority of us said it is more common that where both of the partners are consensual and they took precautionary measures before they had sex. And so that's what we believed, and we believe that can give free and informed consent. And then with our second situation, we decided, majority decided that it's an absolutely no, because Jenna is under the influence, and it's as we watch in the video, it's not the consent doesn't count if you're under the influence.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stop share just for a minute here, and I have one more slide, but I'll share it here in a little bit. So we have 5 minutes. In our last slide, I actually have a QR code that we would like you to go to that code, of course. And there's a survey about our class today. But before we do that, does anyone else have anything to share? Erin, do you have anything you want to share?
I just wanted to make a comment about, that activity. So some of you may have already seen some of those scenarios in action, and some of you may have never seen anything like that yet. And it's important to realize that probably sometime in your life, whether it's soon or whether it'll be in 5 or 10 years, you're going to come across scenarios like the ones that we just mentioned. And there, in the past probably 5 years, there's been a lot of cases, especially on college campuses, of those exact scenarios. Was that person able to give free and informed consent to have sex? Is a drunk girl, just because she's drunk, does that mean that is that okay to have sex with her? Those kinds of things, they come up all the time, and people are put away for years upon years in rape trial cases for those exact scenarios. So it's really important to know what free and informed consent is. And like I said, you might not be able to utilize that right now in your life, but probably at some point you will. Or you might be able to draw on a situation that you personally know. And so it is very important to have consent every time, whether you're a male or you're a female, out of respect for your partner. But also, you don't want to get into legal trouble as well. And sometimes things seem fun or harmless, but it is very important to know where that line is.
Thanks, Erin. And Donna, I don't know if there's a way, but when we're in person, I usually hand out this everyday consent. It's a one-pager from the National Sexual Violence and Resource Center. And so it really talks about asking permission, asking consent when touching, respecting each other's privacy. So anyway, and actually how to handle no as well if no is given. So I know that we have all your email addresses and probably will be able to send that out, I'm assuming. Okay, it has been a great class. Of course, you're our first class for Discovery Days going virtually, and Erin and I weren't sure how this was going to go, but it's gone great. So we appreciate your participation. It's gone really well. I'm going to share my last slide, and again, it has that QR code, and please, it'll only take just a few minutes for you to answer that, but it'll help us in the future, because like I mentioned in our breakout room, this last breakout room, that Erin and I have been providing this class for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years now, and it really helps us to develop the class for the following years.
Well, we want to thank both Erin and Rebecca for stepping up and offering this class. This has been one, like they said, they've been offering it for 7 years, and it's definitely one that is widely people want to attend. So we appreciate them taking their time to do this. And we could also, Rebecca, if you have the link to that document, we could post it when we share the video on the website as well.
Okay. Just send that to you, Donna?
Yes, please.
Okay, I will do that.
Well, we thank you guys for giving your time today, and for the attendees, we hope maybe you'll be at the session this evening, the happy hour peer-to-peer discussion time. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.